Billy the Liquor Guy here. The story you're about to hear, under too long, is the story of bombs, drugs, untaxed alcohol, terrorism, and the undercover agents who brought it all down. Thanks for being here. Episode 3. In this episode, it's all about keeping up the act. From becoming Billy the Liquor Guy, to navigating tense alliances and unexpected dangers, every move had to be perfect. With criminals watching and partners counting on me, there was no room for miscalculations. The stakes were higher than ever. Let's jump back in. Chapter 5, Billy the Liquor Guy. Our operation expanded across the Binghamton-Vestal area when word of our business spread. One bar owner would talk to another bar owner, and we'd get a new lead. By the third month, our operation covered 40% of Broome County, and that was a huge deal when it came to the state and numbers. Most of our bars were mainstream, nothing too up and up, though we had a few middle-class joints and a sports bar tossed into the mix. One sports bar in particular was run by a former college quarterback once destined for the NFL. A national champion, the quarterback retired after an injury and moved back to his hometown of Vestal, New York, to try his hand in the bar business. He and I hit it off, as talking sports was second nature for me, and making small liquor deals was nature for him. His deals weren't anything noteworthy, but the connection he provided linked us to a long list of alcohol, tobacco, and eventually drug deals that transformed our investigation. The former quarterback had two people interested in our products, but their bars were located in Elmira, New York, approximately 57 miles from where our current operation was set up. The jurisdiction wasn't a factor for Stanton. If you guys are up for a bit of a travel, then you have my blessings. At first, the expansion turned out to be a bust. We arrived at the recommended bar ready to cash in on a big sale, only to find our bar was closing. "You're about a month late," the landlord said as he swept the floor. Owners bolted out of here without even paying the last month. The second recommended bar didn't have much use for us either. "I'm not getting mixed up in anything that goes against the state," the owner said. "I've already had my fair share of run-ins with inspectors. I don't want to give them any reasons to step into my joint more than they already do." "I understand." I stood leaning against his bar. "Do you know if any other bars in the area might be interested? We've come all this way, and I'd like to save myself some fuel on the way home. Our load's pretty heavy." The bartender took a hard look at me. "I don't want to get in trouble, and I don't want anybody blowing me in," I told him, raising my hands. "I'm just looking to get rid of my product." At 6 feet tall, dressed in wind pants and a sloppy shirt, it was safe to assume I fit this guy's mold for another degenerate looking for business. "There's a bar down the street. I don't know that they'll be interested in what you got, but they run a lot of stolen things through there. So you've got a shot," he replied. "Now kindly finish your drink and leave my bar." The Thirsty Bear was an older, one-floor, rectangle building on the corner of a main street. Behind the building was a large parking lot, which everyone used to enter and exit, which would have been good to know at the time. Tony and I had been so busy looking for the joint that we nearly missed the turn to the front entranceway. Spotting it, Tony made an abrupt right-hand turn, causing the van to drive up over the curb, almost on two wheels, making a large screeching sound as we halted in front of the door. The turn captured the attention of an elderly biker who happened to be sitting out front. It was only 11 a.m., but this guy was already stoned out of his mind. "Are you guys drunk?" he said as we stumbled out of the van. "No," we responded. "Stoned? No." "Wow, then you guys are really fucked up," he laughed. You could already smell the liquor that was leaking out of the back door from the bottles we'd broke. We were fucked. We lost some of our product and probably lost our new leads since we arrived looking like morons. So far, it seemed as if expansion wasn't in the cards. But with every action comes a bit of levity. Our arrival had brought a few more patrons out of the bar, all assessing and laughing at the situation. While Tony cleaned up the liquor and answered questions for the curious patrons, all half in the bag, I entered the bar hoping for a quick no so we could end the day. The bar was like a dungeon. It had dark walls, old wooden bar stools, and round wooden tables. There were one old TV mounted behind the bar, a dartboard and a shuffleboard, which was already busy with activity. I counted 25 people, all of whom turned to stare at me as I entered the unused front door. 10 patrons sat at the bar, Five played shuffleboard. 3 hard-looking women sat at the table with 4 other tired-looking bikers, and the rest just seemed to be straggling around. I didn't notice a bartender. I walked up to the bar beside a large motorcycle guy and tried to break the ice. So, is it open bar in this joint or what? The motorcycle guy didn't laugh. Because there's no bartender, I tried to explain. My attempt at breaking the ice was not going as planned. The other gentlemen at the bar inched forward, stopping their conversation to take me in. Do you happen to know if the owner's around? I asked, not letting any more time linger. The motorcycle guy grunted and turned his back from me, carrying on a conversation with the person on his right. What do you want, and what are you selling? A guy with long brown ponytail barked from the kitchen window. I've got some liquor for sale. The guy down the road suggested I stop by. You're not from the liquor boards or a codes inspector, are you? Not today, I tease. I'm making lunch right now, so you got 2 minutes, he said. The entire bar crowd turned and watched me. Someone turned down the music. Well, I used to own a bar, but now I'm in the business of selling cheap liquor to other bars. What do you mean cheap? Is it stolen? For taxation purposes, we had to make sure everyone knew our liquor was untaxed and that they were getting away from paying the state's costs through me. No, it's untaxed. When I had my bar, I used to travel to New Hampshire to buy untaxed liquor for my bar. But now I sell it to my contacts. I've been doing business around Binghamton, but someone suggested I come out to Elmira to check out the bar down the street. They ain't open, he grunted. Yeah, I just found that out. Listen, I don't want any trouble. I just want to sell my product. The guy from the bar down the street thought I could make a deal with you. The gentleman stared at me through the open window. His eyes were dark, almost black, and large. Something about him had put me on edge. After a few seconds of awkwardness, the guy called for someone to work the bar and walked out to greet me. He was taller than I estimated, a little above 6 feet and thin, but not scrawny. I'm Nash, he said, wiping his hand down his apron and extending it to me. This is my joint. Billy the liquor guy, he said, shaking his hand. Nice to meet you. Up close, I could see the gray, wiry hair that surrounded Nash's face. Where's your shit, he said, his voice raspy as if he smoked cigarettes all his life. You've got 2 hard minutes. I led him to the van out front, which Tony was still cleaning. What the fuck is this, Nash said, as he looked at the open back doors filled with liquor and a gentleman in a nice polo shirt bent over cleaning up broken bottles. We had an accident when we pulled in, and you idiots are parked in front of my bar with a van full of exposed liquor? Are you trying to get me busted? Oh, shit, no, I said, realizing how stupid we looked. We didn't know you had a back lot. Close the doors, for crying out loud, he yelled. Pull around to the back, for fuck's sake. I heard Nash mutter choice obscenities as he stormed back into the bar, leaving us to discover the lot ourselves. Just pull the fuck around, I said nervously. We've already irritated this guy enough. Nash and 2 large men were waiting for us as we made the turn. You 2 fuck-ups trying to get me caught up in something? Nash said as he approached the van. Nash, I swear that was just a stupid mistake. We're usually a bit more professional, I said. Nash walked to the back of the van to see what we had. As Tony walked around, Nash stopped him. What the fuck are you doing in the van? He questioned. Inventory. We got a lot of liquor that's spilled in here. I've got to track our losses. Nash, this is Tony, my business partner, I interjected. He can fucking speak, can he? Nash sneered at me. If he's your partner, why didn't he come in the bar? Told you, I was doing inventory. Plus, I didn't want to leave all of our shit unattended, Tony stated. I knew Tony had to be shitting his pants, and I know he was going to chew me out for it once was all said and done. But from the outside looking in, Tony handled himself like a champ. Is he carrying? Nash asked me. I don't know you well enough to answer that, but what do you think? I said. We've got thousands of dollars of liquor there, but I don't want to speak for him. With those last words, Nash cracked a smile. Open the fucking doors already, he said, looking back at Tony. I've got customers waiting to eat. I can't be here dicking around with you 2 morons all day. Tony opened the back door, and just like the others, Nash's eyes lit up. How much for the case of JD, he inquired. You buy 1, it's $220, but you buy 2 and I'll cut it to $400, Tony stated. I don't really need that much, but that's a good price, Nash said, rubbing his chin. Give me a couple cases of JD for now. Nash called his guys over to carry in the cases, which was a nice change of pace. As I followed Nash in for payment, I visually tracked the two gentlemen as they delivered the product down the cellar, which was located to the left of the back door. Listen, is this a one-time deal, or do you come out more often? Nash inquired as he counted the money from the register. I'll cut my regular liquor order back a bit if I know you're coming around again. Don't go crazy and cut back from your distributor, I advised him. When I started going to New Hampshire, I cut off a lot of sales, and believe me, it got noticed. They'll refer you to the liquor board, and then we'll both be in jeopardy. I know that shit. I know what to do. I got you, buddy, I said, pulling up my arms. I just don't want you to start getting in trouble with the liquor board or tax bureau. I've been in this business for 20 years, so I know what to do, he said, handing me $400 in 20s. I had no doubt there were a few $100 or $50 bills under his pile. Yet he chose to pay me in small amounts. That was an old bar trick I knew too well. Pay small and people don't assume you're rolling in the dough, be that criminals or state officers. The small bills forced me to pay attention how Nash carried himself. He was intelligent, spoke properly, and for as rough and tough as he looked, he seemed business savvy. He also handled the cooking, which told me he was a hard worker. My gut told me there was more going on here, so I agreed to take a chance and come back the following week. I wanted to see what I could find out. Upon return to Nash's, I opted to dedicate a little more time inside the bar. Normally, we held a 30-minute policy, but I knew we needed to make an exception here. I spent an hour nestled up to the bar, watching sports on the old TV and making small talk with some of the patrons. By the time I left with a larger order than the previous week, I've learned that Nash was part of a well-known biker gang. His members came to the bar, yet oddly enough, so did other gang members. Nash had a policy that prohibited colors inside his bar, and he made sure his members led by example. He made it known that his bar was a safe haven. Therefore, if a fight broke out, both parties were banned for life. Thirsty Bear was essentially a sanctuary for all bikers, a place they came for a drink, brought a date, or just relaxed, and somehow it worked. On my third visit to Thirsty Bear, I was invited into the cellar, where Nash had been conducting business. The cellar was like an old cave. It exposed stone walls covered in white plaster, spots from age or repair. As I made my way down the wooden, rickety steps, I spotted stacks of beer and liquor that lined the right wall. This caught my attention, and the supply base didn't seem to have a need for me, yet I had just delivered 5 cases of liquor. The other half of the cellar was stocked with merchandise. There were flat-screen TVs, power tools, clothes, and radios, all in their original boxes. As dingy as the cellar was, it was also clean. Nash had everything, included the beer and liquor, on raised pallets, so they didn't touch the old dirt floor. As I reached the last step, I noticed the same 2 guys Nash had brought outside with him for the first time we met. Gunner and Bones, as I'd got to know them, were sitting around an old bar table. I noted the weapons that were protruding underneath their shirts. They merely grunted and nodded their heads toward Nash's office, which was tucked back in the corner. Well, that's quite an inventory, I joked as I stepped inside Nash's oasis. His office was larger than I expected. The walls and floor were the same as outside, but he'd lined up shelves and filing cabinets so that everything was neatly organized. Yeah, I deal with a lot of stuff, Nash smiled. Strangest thing I ever sold over a bar was a quarter of a cow, I said, making myself comfortable in a chair across from his desk. Really? Yep. One night, some guy came in from a meat processing plant with a quarter of a cow cut up. I took it over to the bar and just put it in my freezer. Now that I've never done, he laughed. Well, I'd say that loot out there puts shame to the side of beef. As we talked, I noticed a bundle of cash lying on a shelf behind his chair. The money was wrapped in a bank rolls. While Nash swapped stories, I nonchalantly rattled the wrappers off my head, estimating $20,000 to $30,000. My instincts were right, I assured myself. This guy was doing a lot more than liquor tax evasion. I spent 20 minutes in Nash's office shooting the shit about life, business, and my favorite topic, sports. I didn't comment on the money or inquire about any other business endeavors, as I didn't want to break his trust. Too much curiosity from my end could have made me questionable, so I remained aloof, talking about boring, everyday shit. I did find out that Nash had original stock in McDonald's and Harley-Davidson, which had been set up by family members years ago. He also owned several apartment buildings in the area. This only validated that Nash was a smart businessman, be that criminal or not. You're going to have to start wearing a wire, Stan stated over the line. Your team needs to know what's going on when you're out of sight. If dangerous things are happening in the basement, surveillance can't tell. And from what it sounds like, you've got something bigger here that we need to explore. I gave Stan a hard time about the wire, but agreed on one stipulation. If I don't feel safe or comfortable, I have the right to remove it without worrying about the backlash. I trust you, Billy, Stan said. Feel free to use your discretion. You're the one in there, not us. You need to do what you can do to prove your case while keeping yourself safe. The next 2 visits to Thirsty Bear were uneventful, which is ironic since I had a wire disguised inside a beeper to record everything. I wasn't invited into the basement or able to have any long conversations with Nash due to steady business that had been rolling in. One afternoon, I walked in the bar to find Nash in the kitchen, busy with a lunch order. I took a seat, shot the shit with a couple guys per usual. Billy, Nash called out, can you go around the bar and hand me a cup of seltzer? As I stepped behind the bar, happy to be chosen for a task, a large, angry man sitting at the opposite end of the bar began shouting at me. Who the fuck are you, and what the fuck do you think you're doing? He sneered, rising from his seat. Nash asked me to grab him something from the bar. I said, holding up a red water glass in defense. Well, not why I'm fucking sitting here, he doesn't, he said, walking towards me. The man's giant physique hovered over me. He was easily 6'5" and stacked with muscle that I wanted to keep away from my face. Listen, I don't want a problem, I said, directing my voice towards the food service window. I don't give a fuck what you want, he grunted, less than a few feet away from me. This is my fucking bar, and I don't know you from a hole in the wall. I could tell he had a few drinks from the stagger in his voice. He stopped an inch from my face, his shoulders pushed back and his chest pushed out, like a rooster preparing for a fight. I mentally scrambled as he backed me up against the bar. There was no way out. I braced for the impact of his fist, praying like hell Jeff and Docs didn't come storming in, when Nash stepped in. What the fuck are you doing yelling in my bar? He shouted, pushing the guy away from me. What the fuck am I doing? The angry man shouted at Nash. You're questioning me? Who the fuck is this guy? Are you questioning me? Nash asked, stepping closer to the man that could send him flying through the wall. Are you questioning my decisions in my bar? The bar that pays you to serve drinks? That's exactly what I'm doing. I don't work well with people who question my judgment, nor do I work well with people who interrupt my business as you are. So, this guy shows up and suddenly he's buddy-buddy with you. Your dumb ass doesn't even know who the fuck this guy is, yet you're protecting him over me. In actuality, the angry muscle man was right. I was an undercover agent trying to get a lead on Nash's business. But because I was able to help Nash make money, my relationship became more important than his employee behind the bar. An employee who was paying attention and questioning things that Nash should have been. But as I learned, money typically prevails over logic, especially when you're dealing with criminals. Number 1, I like this guy, Nash said, his face tense. Number 2, he makes me money. Number 3, all you do is steal my money. Muscle Man stood there, calm as ice, and stared at me with a large smile plastered across his face. He raised his hand over Nash's head and pointed his fingers at me. The first time you fuck up, I'm going to be there, he smirked. And just when you're down, I'm going to take your fucking head off. Understand? And that was it. Muscle Man pushed his weight past Nash and went back to his stool, angrily watching every move I made. Next person that questions my judgment is going to find their ass out of my establishment, Nash shouted. I went on to see Muscle Man a few more times, but he never said a word. He just stopped whatever he was doing and turned to watch me. Luckily for my crew and for Muscle Man, his hostile president dissolved a few weeks later after his bike hit a patch of gravel and landed him in a rehabilitation center for injuries to his back and left leg. Our operation would be complete without further interference from him, and he'd heal without taking part in the multiple arrests that would happen at Nash's bar. Meanwhile, there had been a big to-do between Jeff, Docs, and Tony while I was staring up at the nostrils of Muscle Man. Jeff and Docs wanted to run in and save me, while Tony urged them to hold back and let me take the hits. It sounded cold at the time, but Tony was ultimately right. As much as I didn't want Muscle Man's fist hitting my face, I also didn't want my team to storm in and blow our undercover operation. Going forward, we decided that I would use the term black smoke to let my unit know if I needed backup should such an event arise in the future. While the bar incident had put my team on edge, It confirmed I held Nash's trust. That was just what I needed to divulge what else was going on inside the bar. Throughout the next few weeks, I began staying for lunch at the Thirsty Bear. Nash was a pretty good cook and made a mean cheeseburger. I would wait for the lunch crowd to disperse, hang out with him for a bit, and try to dig deeper. You know, I can get you designer purses and scarves if you're interested, I suggested. My buddy has a business. Does it look like I deal in fashion apparel, he joked. I only have time for large ticket items. Get me some stolen TVs and we can talk business. All that shit is stolen? I asked as I followed him to his office for his break. No, your mother gave it to us, he muttered. Use your head. Where the fuck do you think it comes from? We got a guy at Sears, hooks us up once a month. Docs investigated the Sears connection and sent that case off to separate division. Once the weather became nice, Nash invited me to his camp for one of his monthly biker parties. I knew the parties were significant because I would hear all the guys in the bar talking about them. However, excited as I may have been, the request and possibility to venture out there was immediately put to a stop by Stanton. I don't deny you much, but this one is too secluded. Something happens, we can't get people out there to you fast enough. Sorry, Billy, this one is a no. I pouted like a child at first. I knew the party would be loaded with criminal activity and that we would have been able to get our hands on some big shit. But eventually I rationalized that Stanton had my best interest at heart, with no way for surveillance or backup to be on scene. Jeff and Docs would have risked my life and my team's life in the hopes of some fast action. The upside of the scenario turned out to be more manageable invitation to one of Nash's steak dinners. The only catch would be that he wanted Tony to come too. You're my guest. Come with your delivery and have a nice steak with us, he asked, and bring your partner. Tell him we would have robbed him by now if he wanted to. Polo shirt doesn't tend to scare us too easily, so there's no need for him to stay in the van any longer. I knew Tony would be nervous. He talked to Nash and his barkeepers during liquor transaction all this time, but he never left the van. He'd grown comfortable in that role, so stepping outside of it was going to be a big deal. We'll go in, say hi, eat a steak, and go home, I told him. It's just that easy. I detected the nervousness, and for fear of Nash's detecting it as well, I decided short visits would be best for both ends. Tony dressed in khaki pants and a polo shirt that had an alligator embedded on the right side of his chest. His attire was far from appropriate for this crowd, but I didn't want to make him nervous, so I left it alone. The bar was packed with bikers dressed in chaps, leather vests, and pants, and grungy t-shirts. Most of the guys and some of the women wore sleeveless shirts that advertised their heavily tattooed arms. Are you fucking kidding me? Tony whispered as we made our way in, all eyes gleaming at Tony's unfamiliar presence. Just relax, I said, smiling and slapping my hand on his shoulder. Nash came out to greet us. His handshake to Tony seemed to relax the crowd who was standing on guard. I'm glad you finally came in, Nash said, gesturing for Tony to take a seat at the end of the bar. Ryan's my numbers guy here. He likes to keep a low profile too, so I get your reluctance to be in the spotlight in here with us. Nash had picked up on Tony's uncomfortableness even after I thought we'd had him straight. What can I get you to drink? Nash inquired, setting out silverware for Tony and myself. Tony ordered a beer while I tried to fill any voids. Tony has a business in Saratoga dealing with his high-end stuff, so he's always on the phone. Your cell phone rings don't fucking work half the time we're down here, but he can get some shit from the parking lot. Now, what kind of steak you got tonight? The banter helped put Tony at ease, but I knew I would pay for putting him in the middle of a lie Nash was so excited to hear more about. After a few minutes, Tony's guard dropped. He joined in on a few jokes and laughs, but when Nash excused him to grab our steaks, Tony looked at me in panic. I don't like steak, he exclaimed. Seriously, I questioned. Who the fuck doesn't like steak? I don't. Well, why the fuck didn't you say you didn't like steak before we came into a steak dinner? I figured they'd have something else to eat. Haven't you ever been to a spaghetti dinner or chicken barbecue before? You know what they serve? They serve what the fuck is advertised, chicken or spaghetti. There aren't other options. Before Tony could respond, Nash arrived with 2 large, beautiful pieces of prime rib, steaming hot baked potato, dripping with butter, blistered green beans, and a fresh-baked roll. My mouth watered. Eat your shit, I said, and slide pieces of your steak in your napkin, I whispered. Don't let him see that you're not eating. I didn't wait to see if Tony agreed with my statement or not. Instead, I sliced into my juicy steak and indulged myself in one of the best slices of prime rib I'd ever had. After dinner, Nash arrived with a box for Tony's leftovers and mashed potatoes, which he quickly slid his food into so Nash wouldn't catch his covered steak. You know, Tony, I can honestly say I would never see this guy as your partner, Nash said, leaning onto the bar. We get along pretty good. He makes the deals and I tend to the money. It's been working out well to this point. Yeah, I don't have a head for business, but he does. I ate it through a mouthful of potatoes. To my surprise, Tony and Nash ended up talking business and motorcycles for the remainder of the evening. Tony's riding knowledge and motorcycle history, something Stan had pegged from his file, drew in comments from fellow bikers around. So everyone groaned when I thanked Nash for the dinner and I explained we had a delivery to get to. You deliver at night, Nash questioned. Sometimes, I replied. It depends on our order level and how fast we can get to all of them. Well, I might have to start placing larger orders then. Having you out here in the evening could be a whole new ballgame. You've got to see what Thirsty Bear is really like. Back in the van, Tony laid into me. Are you fucking crazy? Did you see the knives and things those guys all had? Every one of them was carrying. I told you, they're real fucking bikers. I laughed taking Tony's doggy bag away from him. If he wasn't going to eat the steak, I sure as hell wasn't going to let him go to waste. I can't believe that's what you've been dealing with this whole time, he explained. Yeah, well, now you got to start coming in with me. What? Tony shouted. I'm not fucking going back in there. They've got knives in their sleeves and we're on our own. I admit it's a stretch from liquor tax evasion, but we're on to something big here. Tell me you see that. What I fucking see is a dangerous situation we're not equipped to handle, Tony stressed. We could have fucking died in there. And for what? Something that we're not sure about? Tony, no one is going to die at a steak dinner. I laughed. I promise you're okay. I've been in and out of there for weeks now. They trust us. They trust you, Tony huffed. And now you're trying to pull me in on this shit. You're already in it, I said, perplexed by his statement. Did you think if they killed me inside the bar that they weren't going to come out and shoot you just as quickly? I guess I wasn't prepared how rough it is in there, Tony shrugged. And you've been in there the whole time? This was the evening, I reminded Tony. Our route happens in the afternoon when it's quiet. People there for lunch. It's not like what you saw tonight. It's calmer. Tony hemmed and hawed the rest of the drive back. I harassed him, trying to give him a hard time. But in the end, I knew Tony was a family man. He had young kids at home that he wanted to be safe for. I had children and a wife at home too, yet in this moment, the thrill and high from doing something big clouded that more than I cared to admit. By the time we arrived back at the station, Tony agreed to go back inside, Thirsty Bear. However, he insisted that his visits would be sporadic, and he had no desire to become a fixed bar figure for the remainder of the operation. His request suited me just fine, since we needed to continue under the theory that Tony was a busy man consumed by phone calls and his mobile device. Chapter 6. Tony, my man. While my time with Nash grew, so did our operation. Thanks to continual referrals and Stanton's enthusiasm for expansion, Operation Spirits stretched across several regions of upstate New York. Tony, who was much more grounded when it came to time schedules, had mapped out our weekly route, which held deals in Binghamton, Elmira, Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and several other little towns in between. The strategically arranged routes included days and times for each location. As tight and grounded as I thought it was, the schedule made us appear more legit to follow criminals and keep us on track. Once Nash got wind of our travel routes, he set up a meeting with his friends at the Polish Community Club in Albany. For 2 months, we delivered a steady stream of untaxed liquor to them without a complaint or watchful eye. But by the 3rd month, we detected the attention of 2 large black gentlemen who monitored us from across the street. For 3 weeks, we pulled onto the scene and find the same 2 men watching. Jeff and Docs looked into the men to see if they were harmful or just curious, but nothing turned up. I think they're just curious, Jeff said after the 5th week. I think they're waiting to rob us. They've been watching us for too long, Tony dug into Jeff. I couldn't say if I thought those guys were going to rob us or if they were just bored. Yet I did have the sense that they were up to trouble. Either way, each week I got out of the van and nodded my head in their direction, and the 2 would nod back. On the 8th week, we finally got some action. Hey, the heavy-set guy yelled from the stoop he was sitting on. You got a minute? Tony immediately grabbed my arm. No, Bill, We don't have time for this today. He was nervous. All he saw was bad news. However, bad news is what I based my whole life around, so I couldn't let this opportunity pass me by. I've got to. Make it quick, I yelled back. Both men stood up. The man on the right was tall, slender, and dark. It was warm out, but he was sporting a long pair of pants and a flannel shirt. Unlike his partner, the heavy-set guy wore shorts and sandals. For fuck's sake, Billy, Tony sighed, as the men crossed the street and walked toward us. We've got a schedule. Tony, you want to keep pulling up to the spot wondering if those two assholes are going to rob us, or would you like to find out what the fuck they want? I want to keep to the schedule and get the fuck out of here, he snapped. Poor Tony wasn't going to win this one, and he knew it. What you got in the van? Heavy one asked as they approached us. What is it to you? You got liquor in there? Why do you need to know, I asked, leaning back against the van to play my usual aloof routine. Is it stolen? Tall one questioned. No, it's untaxed. You know the difference? I said, folding my arms across my chest. Means you got that from another state, right? Yeah. We've been watching you, Heavy one said, so we noticed. You're not too discreet. Well, I've got a customer for you, if I can get a cut, Heavy one grinned. We're not into making deals. We've got enough business as it is. What if I told you that my cousin runs an underground club and needs a lot of liquor fast? Heavy said had my attention. An underground club sounded like a gold mine. I heard about them in the city, often set up in empty warehouses or two-story homes. They were constantly shut down due to safety regulations and city ordinances. More importantly, they were often littered with drugs and other criminal activity, so I wasn't about to let this one go. Who's this mysterious cousin? I inquired. And how soon does he need our product? A smile spread across Heavyset's face. If you got a second, I can call him and have him come down. We don't have a second, Tony interjected. We have other deliveries to make. Tell you what, I said. Why don't you give your cousin a call and see how far away he is? Heavyset dialed while I stood close enough to listen. Nah, it's the dude that's been making deliveries to the Polish Club, I heard him say. They're the real deal. They want you to come and look at their stuff. You're going to be really interested in this one. The cousin wanted us to drive to his pawn shop, which was 5 miles from our current location, but Tony wouldn't budge. I'm not driving this van down there. We're already behind. If this guy wants to do business, then he has to coordinate a time for an actual deal instead of stalking us like a bunch of criminals. Tony's frankness took me back. We're off schedule, and a trip down to another shop where we'd have to display our liquor and go through our whole spiel would push us late into the evening. So, as much as I wanted to get this guy on board, I had to decline. Guys, I have to go with my partner here, I said. If your guy wants to do business, your cousin is going to have to arrange a time to meet up. We're on a tight delivery schedule today. Our customers that ordered products are waiting for us, and when we do business with someone, they're always first priority. No doubt, Tall Man said. That's some serious business shit right there. Heavyset wrote his number on a piece of paper and handed it to me. Give me a call the next time you're coming in, and I'll make sure he's here. Sounds good, partner, I said, shaking both guys' hands. Looking forward to seeing you on this side of the street next time. The two laughed and stepped aside as Tony and I drove off to our next destination. The ride wasn't ultra pleasant, as Tony was pissed that he put us in another unpredictable situation, but my high of what was to come was enough to drive me through his heat and finish our remaining orders in record speed. The rest of our week was typical. We sat through preliminary meetings, decided what bars had territories we needed to push into, calculated numbers and costs, and discussed a push for further connections from Nash. Meanwhile, I couldn't get my mind away from the possible meetup with the two gentlemen and their cousin. Heavyset, whose name turned out to be Stump, solidified a date for the following week. By the time we reached the Polish Community Center, I was running on pure adrenaline. I was so excited about this new prospect that I barely spoke to the old guys who always invited me to sit for a cup of coffee and a few stories. When we pulled up to the 2-story location just 2 blocks away from the community center, the cousin was already standing on his front porch, waiting for us. This guy was well above 6 feet tall, had a solid, strong build, and was so large in stature that I hadn't noticed the guy who had been standing behind him when we arrived. Stump introduced us to his cousin, Steele. My cousin here tells me you got some really good shit, he said, all business. Your cousin's a smart man, I said, directing Steele towards the back of the van. Tony opened the back doors and Steele followed the pattern we come to expect upon reveal. Dog, you got some good shit here, he said, his eyes scouring the product. Yeah, We can get whatever you like. We deal in a lot of different items because we have a wide range of liquor customers. For example, I'm going to assume you aren't going to want the same stuff as the Polish Center." Steele laughed and listed off his typical inventory needs: Jack Daniels, Hennessy, Evan Williams. With each name he listed, Tony raised the bottles. "You guys are the real deal," he smiled, hitting his cousin on the back. "You actually came through this time." Steele took a few bottles of Hennessy and Evan, but despite his pleading, we couldn't sell him any Jack. "We got orders to fill today, and our customers come first." "I respect that," Steele replied, rubbing his hands together. "Let me place my order and become one of those customers then. I want some top priority here." Steele put in a fair-sized order, which he agreed to have delivered to the same location the following week. He wasn't comfortable giving his club's location yet, and I respected that. Keeping activity private was the sign of a true criminal. Low-level criminals were proud to offer up their information in order to prove their worth. So his privacy was a sign that we'd hooked up another big one. Steele paid me for half of his order up front. "The other half will be given upon delivery," he stated. "Looks like you know a thing or two about business." "You can say that," he winked as he handed me his number, which he wrote on the back of someone else's business card. "If you need anything, this is my direct line. You don't need to go through Stump anymore. You and I will discuss business one-on-one from here on out." Stump's face sunk. He had hoped for a share in this deal, and clearly Steele wasn't going to allow that. Tony and I ended our time-slotted session faster than expected, which meant everyone walked away pleased. Tony didn't have to refigure our delivery times. Steele got a great score, and I was certain we had just landed a new case. Stump, however, just got a small pat in the back. Chapter 7, Billy the Bear. "Nash wants to see you in the basement," a new bartender stated as I walked into the bar. Tony, who came inside with me, pretended to get an important phone call and headed to the van to alert the team. As I walked down the stairs, 3 other bikers were coming up with merchandise. 2 had small flat screen TVs, and the other had a box of something I couldn't quite make out. I suddenly wished Tony had stayed at the bar so we could figure out where they were going and what they had. But that wish was forgotten the second I spotted 4 shirtless bikers sitting around the table. "So what we got going on here?" I teased, feeling uncomfortable as I walked past the table. A red-headed guy covered in bad tattoos stood up to greet me. "You're Billy the Liquor Guy, right?" he asked. "I am." "Bones asked me to check you out." "Check me how?" I inquired, not sure if I was ready to hear the answer. "Is that all you wanted there?" he asked, nodding to the oversized T-shirt I was wearing. I instantly knew he was talking about a wire. I pulled my shirt over my head before he could say another word and exposed my hairy chest. I emptied my pockets, throwing everything, including my beeper, onto the table. "This is all me, brother. I'm all natural." I smiled, proudly displaying my bare chest. "Billy, stop playing with those monkeys and get the hell in here," Nash yelled from his office. "Sorry, boys, but your boss is calling me," I said as I gathered my items from the table. "It was fun getting to know you all so well, though. Maybe next time you can buy me a drink before I have to see all your ghostly white chest." "That's one hairy motherfucker," I heard the redhead say as I made my way to Nash's door. The rest of the guys roared in laughter. Nash's office was filled with money again, only this time it wasn't stacked on a shelf behind his chair, but was spread across his desk for anyone to see. I estimated $40,000 to $50,000 to be on the desk, and close to 50 packets of $100 bills wrapped and piled on the shelf behind him. "Nash, don't you believe in a safe?" "Holy shit," I exclaimed. "Who's going to rob me?" he said, looking for something on his desk. "I've only had one employee steal a case of beer from me, and he's no longer around." I realized why the men were shirtless. Nash might have told me that no one's going to rob him, but he wasn't stupid enough to give them a chance either. "I'm looking for this damn guy's number. One of my toilets is broken upstairs," he replied, rummaging through his notes. I was tempted to make a crack about losing things and all his money, but I held off temporarily. "You don't fix toilets? You seem to do everything else around here," I said, looking over at the shirtless men who appeared to be having a meeting. "I used to. Now I own a contracting company that takes care of those things. Those assholes out there are part of that team. They're in charge of maintaining my properties and business." "How many properties do you have?" I smirked. 20. Nash went on to list his properties and his business, while my beeper, which I'd placed on his desk, captured everything. "I own the bar down the street, Softail too. I want you to stop down there and see what they're short on for liquor before you leave. Ask for Walt. He's leasing the place right now." So you own 2 bars? I inquired, pretending to be impressed. I couldn't handle one. This one's easy because I'm here. The other one is a pain in the ass. I'm looking to get rid of it. Walt was supposed to buy it, but he's too much of a cokehead to figure his shit out right now. I sat with Nash for a few moments discussing small matters, my chest hair sticking out as we talked. You're always stopping in the day, he remarked in the middle of our conversation. Why don't you stop by one night? I'll introduce you to a few of my property managers. It's a different scene at night. So I noticed from your steak night, which was excellent, by the way, I smiled. I'm not much of a night bar guy, though. I enjoy my couch and baseball games in the evening. But for you, I'll make plans to pop in. Sounds good. Nash was pleased with my answer. As I headed out of his office, he found the number stuck to the bottom of a $500 bill. I kicked myself for not making the joke I intended. We got to hit a new bar, I told Tony as I hopped into the van. A place called Softail. It's a few blocks down. You know we're not supposed to be adding any more joints to our list. We're maxed out. Nash said this guy's a cokehead. Let's see what else he has. No more seeing. We're up to our eyeballs in seeing. Tony, this is the last one, I swear. Tony sighed and threw the van in drive while I radioed in our new stop. The bar was set on the bottom floor of a 3-story apartment complex. Unlike Thirsty Bear, Softail was dark, dingy, and had zero atmosphere. There was a pool and a foosball table, a few dilapidated chairs, and a wooden table, and one person who turned out to be the bartender. Hey, I'm looking for Walt, I said, walking up to the gentleman. He nodded behind me. I almost had to look away. Walt was strangely deformed. His chin was elongated, his lips hung in a diagonal line instead of across his face. He instantly reminded me of Cher's son in the movie Mask. His skin was also riddled in acne, and his thinning hair was all over the place, making me question if that was how his hair always was or if he'd just woken up. I took a deep breath and pinched my thumb into my hand so I wouldn't stare. It took everything in me not to make a joke or react. I concentrated on being Billy the Liquor Guy, reached my hand out and introduced myself. Only this guy didn't take it. I pulled my hand back with a sense of unease and went into my liquor spiel. Walt didn't speak or move as I talked. He just stood there staring at me. For a moment, I wondered if he could speak. How the fuck do I know Nash sent you? Walt rudely interjected. He can speak, I gathered, as the bartender turned around in his seat as if this were a daytime soap opera. Call him, I said nonchalantly. Ask him yourself. Walt grunted and slowly walked towards the phone behind the bar. His conversation with Nash was short. Okay, so what do you got that I'm supposed to be so interested in? Walt said as he put down the phone. He was obnoxious, and I noted not a professional bad guy. I took him to the van, introduced him to Tony, and showed him the liquor I had. He looked at it unimpressed. If this shit is stolen, why isn't it cheaper, he asked. It's not stolen, it's untaxed, I corrected him. You ever been to New Hampshire? Well, I heard about that, but that state doesn't have tax, just like this here is untaxed, I said. Walt stood there, looking at the bottles. Tony looked at me in confusion. Look, I said, irritated, I got a bunch of other places to deliver, so you want anything or not? Walt ended up purchasing 2 bottles of Jack and 1 bottle of well vodka. Up until now, we only dealt in cases, but Nash had sent me to him, so I wanted to look cordial in his eyes, even if this guy was an idiot. As I jumped back in the van, Tony gave me a wide-eyed stare. Waste of time, I said. Can you please start listening to me once and for all, Tony sighed. We're an hour behind, and that guy is going to make me have nightmares for days. His face is creepy. Walt, who had been standing there staring at us, suddenly darted back into the bar. I turned from Tony, attempting to figure out Walt's strange movement, when I noticed 3 black men approaching the rear of the van. Before I could say anything to Tony, they banged on the back hatch to let us know they were there. What the fuck, Tony said, spotting the 3 men in the side window. Get ready to call backup, I said, stepping out of the van. I arched my back and puffed out my chest to overemphasize my large stature as the men walked towards me. They were about 5'8", fairly skinny, and had dark complexions. They had a hard street look to them, so my radar was up. I hear you're selling cigarettes, man, one said in a thick Jamaican accent. While it was posed as a question, the sentence came off in a demanding way, as if this guy was telling me what I had. What do you need? I questioned, folding my arms across my chest. A couple of cartons if you got them, another guy answered, also in a Jamaican accent. You always just approach people on the street asking for items? I inquired, holding my stance. Only if we know they got good stuff, the Jamaican smiled. We don't deal in cartons, I said. We can arrange for more. The Jamaican smiled again. We do business better than your white folk in there. The three Jamaicans laughed in unison. You know about that bar? I inquired. I know a little bit, he said, his white teeth gleaming. Doesn't seem to be too much business happening there. Maybe you're just not looking at the right kind of business. With those words, I was intrigued. I walked to the back of the van, pulled out 3 cartons of Salem's. These are on the house, I said, handing them to the Jamaicans, who were staring at all the liquor in the van. Holy shit, you white boys are the real deal, the smiley one said, his eyes exploring the inventory. That we are, I said, closing the doors. And unfortunately, we're on schedule, so you have to excuse us. We're late. No problem, the Jamaican smiled, pleased with his free goods. Do me a favor, guys, I said, walking around to the front of the van. Tell your friends about us. We're always looking for new business, and that just might be the same business that goes on in there. As Tony pulled away, he ran at about the time we just wasted. Tell Nash we're off this bar, Tony explained. We're stretched too thin as it is. I agreed with Tony. I had little desire to return to Softail anytime soon. Nash and Sia were our larger prospects, and I needed to keep that in focus. Walt and his lonely bar were merely small potatoes. I'm on it, I said, pulling out our itinerary. No more Softail or anything like that from now. We've got bigger fish to fry. At least that was until the call from the Attorney General's office came through in the morning, informing us about what we'd just broken into.
Surviving the streets was one thing. Keeping secrets from my own team was another. As the missions got riskier, the line between friend and enemy started to blur. But the only way out was through. Stick around. The deeper we go, the deadlier it gets.